Welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. We are kicking off a new era of knowledge sharing with our move to video podcasts. Here, you will get to hear more from experts in a more relaxed setup, diving into the nuts and bolts of deep tech and artificial intelligence. This shift to a more visual and flexible format means that you can now tune in whenever and wherever suits you best, bringing the world of AI to the life through dynamic storytelling. Get ready for a lineup of fascinating talks on deep tech and AI, seen through the lens of top minds across the ecosystem. Catch you in the next episodes of the AI Unplugged Without Borders. Now, today, I am meeting with a good longtime friend, Olaf Groth, to discuss the topic of the big flip, how generative AI will be the data-driven business models on their heads. Now, Olaf has 30 years of experiences as an executive and advisor, building ventures across over 35 countries. Olaf is the founding CEO of advisory think tank called Cambrian Futures and of solution development studio called Cambrian Designs. Cambrian Futures is about helping clients with insights and foresights on AI and emerging tech to achieve the cognitive, clean, and secure transformations that increases their readiness, the resiliency, and the return on investment. Now, Cambrian Labs is designed to solutions, concepts to make it all happen in the real world. Olaf is also a professor of practice for global foresight, strategy, innovation, and policy at the UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. Amongst other roles at the university, he serves as the faculty director for the Berkeley Executive Education Program, Future of Technology. He is also a member of the Global Experts Networks for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and of the Global Alliances for AI Governance at the Worldwide Economy Forum. Last but not least, Olaf is a lead co-author of the most recent book that they wrote on the cognitive economy called The Great Revolutionization Strategy and Design for a Smarter Future, and of the AI book called Solomon Code, Humanity in the World of Thinking Machines. Good to see you, as always. And thank you very much for inviting me to your lovely home here in the Berkeley Hills. It's nice weather. When you look over there, you see the San Francisco Bay Area. So as always, thank you for taking the time and tell us a little bit about this area. You just told me a few things that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and likewise, Thomas. It's good to see you. Always good to be with you and have these conversations. It's a storied neighborhood. The inventors of the atom bomb and the H bomb both lived in this neighborhood. And I guess the entrepreneurs behind Twitter lived right up the hill. So this is a great neighborhood to talk about really the beginnings. We still are at the beginnings of the AI era here in this neighborhood.
That's amazing. That's a typical example how multicultural the Bay Area is as a whole. It's just an exciting.
Well, and a great example for the spark of invention and innovation here, right?
Yeah. So we have been here, 33 years?
Oh, 32 years, yes.
Oh, here we go. And I am as fascinated today as I was 33 years ago.
Yes, I
have to admit.
Just never stops ticking.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the topic today. We agreed on a specific title, The Big Flip, how generative AI will be turning data-driven business models on their heads. Now, first off, you have a new book on the global cognitive economy. Tell us a little bit about what this book is about.
The book is really about how there's a changed operating logic for our economy. And it seems subtle, but it is foundational and it's revolutionary. The book was based on the fact that during the pandemic, we saw a lot of our systems come apart. If you think about it, our system of productivity which only starts with working from home, but really had to do with how much data we generated, how we were innovating, how we were ideating, how we produced work, the level of automation, but then also the global financial system, the global education system. 1.2 billion children around the world not getting an education, by way of example. And then our healthcare system, of course, that's the obvious one. So we looked at all these systems and how they're all now interlocking and how they're all disrupted. We have created with our global economy a big system of systems that's very fragile, very prone to disruption. Well, what's coming to the rescue? Modern cognitive technologies. And of course, at the center of all that is artificial intelligence as the brain, as it were, that needs the fuel, and that's the data. Our only chance really to get a grip of this fragility in our global economy is to leverage AI and leverage it really fast and leverage it responsibly, because that is what will give us the understanding of what's happening in these different systems in our environment and how we can control it.
Okay.
It's really a cybernetics function of controlling these different systems.
Interesting. So that's the last book.
That's the last book. That's right.
So your first book, Solomon's Code, which I read and I loved it. It was awesome. Solomon's Code was about the global AI developments. What are you now focusing on in regards to the data?
Yeah, look, in the last book we focused on, like I said, cognitive technology broadly. The first book was AI only, but really what we found is that while we're all focused on AI as the brain or as the engine, as some people say, focusing on the fuel is just as important, if not at times more important. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, we're finding that everybody is looking at models and what models can and cannot do and how we govern models. We need to put equal emphasis on how we look at data and how we govern data. Because without data, without the fuel, the engine can't work. And so that's why we're currently focused a bit more on data than the pure model side of AI.
Let's dive a little bit deeper for the audience who may be still very new to the topic in regards to data.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit more about what data we are talking about, how clean the data should be to have, garbage in, garbage out. Can you elaborate that a little bit more about data? Sure. It's centralized, decentralized. It's a big topic.
Yes, it's a huge topic. Look, currently we're focused on generative AI, but if we're honest, that just started about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and we're still at the very beginning of generative AI. And there, we can talk about what's after generative AI if you want at the end of this talk. But let's face it, we only arrived here because we capitalized on 20 plus years of the internet being around. That means data. AI doesn't work without data. Massive amounts of data for us to be able to train these massive models. Now, as we were generating this data in the beginning of the internet, we got addicted to a paradigm of data being free. And that really it was a substitute currency for companies to gain insights on us, to stimulate us, to engage us, to make matches with other people, with vendors, whatever have you. And so data was a very important currency. We didn't get paid for it. We paid it in order to get access and to get things to work. But this paradigm of data being free is fundamentally flawed. Because in that data is tremendously valuable insight. And when something is valuable, you don't want to just give it away for free. If you do, it leads to a misallocation of value in the economy. Because when people don't value it, they can't price it, right? And if it's not priced, it can't find the right signals in the market to find the right places for use and for application. And so we're saying we have to flip that model on its head. And find a way to understand the different value of different types of data in the economy. And some data that we generate is just not valuable or has very little value. And some data is valuable and you're happy giving it away in exchange for the barter trade of getting functionality. But then there's some other data that can generate value downstream, as it were, that you don't even know about, that is completely opaque to you, that other people are generating far away from you without ever telling you that it's happening. And that's the part that needs to change.
So you mentioned where we are today is, it's not the only reason, but is that 20 years in the internet world, so to speak, we have collected massive amount of data. We collected data on the enterprise side for the B2B. We have the consumer side. You wake up in the morning and you turn on your watch with GPS and you have your electrical toothbrush with Wi-Fi, and then you turn on your phone with GPS and you look at all the news. And I mean, the whole day, data is being created by individuals multiplied by billions of people.
That's right.
And then you look at an app that you maybe upload from the internet on your mobile phone. And sometimes it's like you hit the confirm the terms and conditions.
We all do.
And we don't even think about it. At the same time, I had the experience myself. There were a few incidences where I don't want to hit the terms acceptance button because I don't know that startup company and whatever else is with the data. But let's face it, the Googles in the world, they have us. They control our data, and they turned it into a multi-billion, trillion-dollar kind of an empire. Now, having said that, you said earlier, like, we have to flip it upside down. How do you even tackle that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe that the other side will just calmly sit there and let it happen.
That depends, right? So yes, it was fine for Google to have our data for as long as Google didn't get to know every element of our lives, every facet, every characteristic. And it's not just Google, frankly. It's all the digital hyperscaler platforms, both here in China and elsewhere, right? And now we have reached a point where we're saying, well, look, these digital platforms, these service providers get to know us so well. They get to know very intimate details. They're going much deeper in our lives. And because the data economy has spread into every corner of the overall economy, people are now starting to trade data with each other, and they can triangulate really who we are, like I said, in every facet, right? And so companies like Google and Amazon and others, frankly, often know you almost better than you know yourself, right? And so at some point then we started to have this awareness, and then we got anxious about it. We said, well, is that really what I want? I want them to know me well enough to give me certain services, but there's a border somewhere. There's a fine line, and we have crossed that line, right? Because it's not just a deal I make with Amazon and Google when I click accept. I'm automatically then also giving away rights to my data to all of the advertising networks, yes, but there is a second and third tier of data brokers and of digital service providers and of, frankly, non-digital companies, let's say like political lobbying groups and insurance companies, and all these, this part of the economy that could benefit from your data, you never have any visibility into, that uses your data, figures you out, and you never have any right to say, I don't want this, I want that, let's talk about this. Much less get any compensation for it. And that is, I think, where the buck stops, quite literally. So that's where we are now. So then the question is, okay, what do you do with that? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business professor. I am pro digital service providers. I don't want the Googles and Amazons of this world to go away, much less anybody smaller in other areas of my life. So I want them to have certain amounts of data, and I want to be respected in my data dignity and my data agency, where I have a co-determination right to say, what part of who I am digitally can you have in exchange for your services, and what part do we need to talk about? And so I'm asking them to come to the table. And this is the time that we're in right now. It's incredibly exciting because, of course, there is resistance. Right. And as a business professor, I can understand that every quarter, the CEOs of these big hyperscaler platforms have to be in front of Wall Street analysts and defend earnings. Okay. And I think deep down, everybody understands change is coming. So let's be constructive. Let's get to the table together and figure out how you get the data you deserve that is sanctioned by me or anybody who creates data. Just think about the content industry, right? Hollywood and YouTube. And we just had this big, lawsuit happening, I guess, between OpenAI and YouTube about, who can use whose data. We need to discuss this and figure this out, right? So data as a fuel is important. The digital economy can't tick without it. And I think more people need to be cut in, need to have a voice, need to be able to make money from it. And that includes people like you and me as consumers.
So last year, I spent quite a bit of time in that, and I know you have expertise there too, in the world of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, which conceptually is beautiful. I mean, that's the way the world should work. But the reality is, I learned it the hard way, that's not even close to do that, right? So I even decided to walk away a little bit from that. But the concept is the same. And what you just said, for me, comes a little bit towards into the directions of the DAOs, which means, let's say I am a giant hyperscaler and I make a ton of money on advertisement, right? Or the media companies.
Yeah.
They live from that. Now, what you are saying is, and I totally agree with you, I want to decide what kind of data and how much data I give to company A and B so that they are in a position to provide me the service that is useful to me. When I talk to entrepreneurs or anybody, and even in my own career, I always like to emphasize on that one question, and that is, what's in it for blank? Yeah. And blank is me, it's the other side, it's the partner, it's whoever. And what's in it for me is very clear. I control, I feel more comfortable, I feel more secure. And to be honest with you, it would be nice to actually take a few data that are maybe uncomfortable to give to somebody, but I might be able to sell it to somebody else for a different service and I may get some money back. Well, that's not how the world happens today. So let me flip this over then. Yeah. I am now on the hyperscaler side, and I have to look at my next earnings call, as you just pointed out.
Yeah.
And you are telling me we should all come to the table and we all should then discuss how do we meet in the middle. Now, if I would be on the hyperscaler side or anybody else, give me a good reason why I should even show up on the table.
I'll give you the best reason of them all. And it became clear in the lawsuit, the settlement of a lawsuit, 2 weeks ago by Google. We're talking north of $5 billion payment. And there was a smaller one of, I want to say, $500 million as well, a second one. What this new data economy, if we protect data footprints, does for you, and I can explain how it works, is it gives the hyperscaler platforms quality assured data, meaning quality and ownership assured data. So I need to find a way to understand what part of this individual footprint is good and valuable data, right, that I can buy, that I can acquire, that is valuable for the models I need to train, and for the back-end relationships with the advertisers that I have, that I want, and I want it legally, and I want it without people feeling objectified. Because when they do, that's when they start suing me, right? It's what we call data debt. And so we don't want to acquire data debt and liabilities, right? Because that $5 billion is something that the CFO, if this continues, they're going to have to somehow treat that as a liability into the future as well. If I'm the CFO, I do not want that liability. If I'm the general counsel, I would advise my CEO at this hyperscaler company, don't engage in dirty data, meaning data that is either corrupted or biased or obtained illegally or in a way that people perceive as unethical, right? And so if I get high quality data, so I don't have to indemnify anybody in my business ecosystem against lawsuits, that's a real win. And as we saw from the $5 billion lawsuit settlement, that's real money in the bank. So that's point number one. Point number two is, I think it's a fallacy to assume that if we give people like you and me the chance to say, here is certain data that is off limits, it's too sensitive, right? But here's certain data that we can negotiate. That automatically that means that less data flows into the hyperscaler platforms. If you and I have more agency and we feel like the hyperscaler platforms are respecting us, right? We get a say in what they get and at what terms. I think eventually we're going to give them more data, not less data, right? And in fact, I spoke with a board member of a big European airline, and he said, if I had a tool like the one that, for instance, we have designed, then I could create more customer intimacy because my customer trusts me more. And intimacy means I'll give you more data and not less data. So right now, of course, these hyperscaler CEOs need to, in front of Wall Street, protect the current revenue streams. But there will be a flip, either through all these mega settlements or through new regulation, right? That will put this on its head and give C-level management an opportunity to say, you know what? We're going to play clean. We're going to play responsible. We're going to play with a focus on trust assurance, which really enhances your brand. And that's the moment in time where we are. And in my humble opinion, it's a window sort of between now and the next sort of 3 or 4 years where that is going to happen.
Okay, so that's important because it's not happening over 6 months or 7. It's a long-term kind of a thing. Okay, so that's more realistic than anybody may listen to this. It's like, you know what, there's an opportunity and in 3 months it's going to happen.
No, but you do. If I'm an entrepreneur, I would say, you know, talk to your team, talk to your chief commercial officer, talk to your data scientists, and then, of course, talk to your lawyers and your VCs and say, how do I prepare now for what's coming? And, you know, when I say 0 to 3 years, it could mean next year, right? So we have to get ready now. And the VCs have to know that if I don't prepare for this business model flip, I'm going to lose revenue. Yeah. And I'm going to get sued. I might accrue liabilities on the books as well. And nobody wants that.
Yeah. That's an interesting observation. I always thought it from where's the opportunity for a startup? But there's a flip side to it, and that is where's the threat of the existing businesses who are relying on it? And I would assume nobody comes to the table without pressure. Nobody comes to the table without having the answer to what's in it for me, meaning both sides or everybody's side. But in this particular case, I would assume, and money talks, that similar to like an AI Act, and the European, I give them all the credit for being the leader in putting these frameworks in place. It may be a little bit slower than expected, but the progress is there. Do you believe to trigger this, to get people to the table for this kind of a conversation?
Yeah.
Legal frameworks needs to be in place first to motivate the other side to actually show up.
So I think it was necessary, and I too am grateful to the European Union for putting the stake in the ground, right? And I don't know how you feel about the GDPR and about the EU AI Act. I believe that it is, of course, heavy-handed. I think a stronger, even stronger use case focus would be the right way to go. Let's say for forthcoming U.S. regulation, we're very use case focused in the United States. But I do believe that this stake in the ground was necessary, that it sends a good signal that will be a catalyst toward that data flip, that data revolution that I'm talking about. However, do we necessarily need to wait for U.S. regulation on this front? It will be good to have. I'm convinced it will happen, but it'll happen very differently in the United States than in Europe. At the moment, we have some important bills pending that deal with data regulation, but we are seeing the states like California and a good dozen other states forging ahead absent regulation in Washington. Is that sustainable? In the long run, probably not, because we can't expect entrepreneurs with very little overhead budgets addressing 50 different state level regulations, right? But absent that, I think where entrepreneurs will get the signal is less from regulators, at least in the short term, over the next year or so, especially with the election coming now, right? This is not a priority topic for either side, but rather from lawsuits. And this is always the way America has worked, of course. Europe is preemptive and preventative regulation forward. In the United States, we litigate to make change. And that's where I'm quoting these lawsuits. I mean, GM just got sued last week, right, over selling on, I think it was a Cadillac model that generated all this data on driving behavior, and it got sold on to, I believe, insurances. I could be wrong, but so people are suing now, and some of these turn into class action lawsuits. No entrepreneur who is in ABC rounds wants to deal with a class action lawsuit. Right. And look, I mean, let's flip this into a positive case for business as well. It's actually been proven that startups and really any kind of enterprise that respects people's individual dignity, that places emphasis on trust and responsibility, actually has a better, higher brand equity in the market than those that don't. And typically, even in America, I think 79% or so of everybody, of all the consumers are saying, we actually want more respect for our data now that we have reached this state of the digital economy. We're no longer in the year 2000, we're 2024, right? So we have to move on and evolve.
So let's bring AI a little bit more into this conversation. We're talking a lot about data, there's unstructured data and edge data, backend data, whatever. How does AI play a huge role in moving forward and clean them up and use them and train models and custom models?
Yeah. So first off, AI, and especially generative AI, is now pushing the envelope on this data flip, right? Because we are, of course, as we're witnessing, getting everybody's data to train these models, rightly or wrongly. It's happening. And so it is now leading to more lawsuits. It is now leading to greater conversations about data ownership and data veracity and things like that, right? So that's one way in which these large LLMs are pushing us. Now, AI can also be found on the solution side. And for full transparency, we have developed a solution with 5 out of 8 patents granted at this point that has AI in it that lets you do a couple of different really cool things. So the first one, I'll pick up on something you said earlier, is when I I open up a new app and I need to click yes on the user agreement, right? Mm-hmm. Most of us click without reading.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. I have never met a person who actually read the whole thing.
No,
never.
And you would argue, right? Maybe they've been written to not be read, right? Who does that to themselves? And so I think there are these statistics out there that say if you read every user agreement on your iPhone for every app, you'd be reading for 36 hours or something like that, right? So nobody does that, and that's clearly not consumer friendly, right? So AI can understand based on a few dimensions that you tell it about yourself, about your data privacy profile, done within a few minutes, can understand who you are in terms of data privacy, and can then analyze that, we call it a privacy charter, against the user agreements that you're supposed to sign, whether you download an app or you go to a service provider online on your laptop. Either way, it says, okay, you're supposed to click yes here. How does this compare to your privacy charter, right? Understanding what the different clauses are on both sides and how they fit together. That's something that AI can help with, right? Then it can say, okay, let's parse this into, let's say, 3 rough categories. You can do greater parsing if you want. Here is data, like I said earlier, that you are happy giving away, right? For whatever reason. Then there's data that's kind of questionable, right? Like you said earlier, so if you have, I don't know, some rare disease, you don't want your insurance company necessarily to have the data, or some advertiser. But hey, if a university network comes knocking and says, we'd like to study the disease, and we're going to keep you anonymous, would you mind sharing the data? You might well say, sure, why not? And you might even say, I don't need a lot of money for that because I want to help myself and other people, right? And then there is some data that you definitely don't want out there anywhere. I don't know, maybe because you drop by a liquor store every Friday and buy 15 bottles, whatever it may be, right? So it's sensitive to you. Mm-hmm. And so the AI can then understand, and we call it we call it a privacy agent. We dubbed it the BouncerBot, right? It can understand what types of data in your background get parsed in which way, right? Then it can help you engage with the other side, because we're now entering the bot economy. Mm-hmm. And you can tell the bot of the service provider, here's what we've got in these 3 buckets, okay? Let's start talking. And of course, all of this happens in split seconds. Yeah. You have no idea it's happening in the background, right? Of course, the moment there is a snag somewhere or an abnormality, you get pinged, right, for your opinion. So then, thirdly, the bot can then understand, okay, who out there has a user agreement that complies more with who you are, and if these guys over here don't want to play with you in a privacy-respecting way, I'm going to go over there, right? That's going to be a huge lever for a lot of companies that don't respect your privacy, right? So that's the other thing. And then, of course...
But that assumes, what you just said, that's an interesting one, but that assumes that looking at the plus minus 10 hyperscalers that we have in the world, half of them are in China, half of them are here, nobody's in Europe, which is scary in the first place, but that's the reality. It takes a lot of time for somebody to be in a position to compete against the established hyperscalers. So it's not that easy to go somewhere else when there is nobody else to go somewhere.
For certain types of things, that's true. And we need to create more entrepreneurial alternatives. But once you send pricing signals like this, once there is an almost guarantee that people will come to you if you respect their privacy, then I think that will open up more alternatives automatically. Because people will say, look, these companies are disrespecting me. They're getting sued. I'm not going to wait till my lawsuit is through. I'm going to go over here. A savvy entrepreneur will say, come any, come all to me.
Interesting.
Right? So that's one lever.
Okay.
And then to just finish off the AI functionality, the AI can also then understand, the bot can understand how your privacy sensibilities are changing. So you and I are now too old to have babies, right? But your privacy preferences may change, between you being 16 years old and you being 26 years old. Once you start having family, you have responsibility, you care about your kids' privacy and how they get socialized. And so it can actually pick up on life patterns changing, right? Or job profiles changing, and then change your privacy settings accordingly. Now, the big end game here is that this kind of personal data agent can then flow your data into an open, multi-sided data market, package it, value it, price it toward other people who might want to use that data. So all of this may sound like science fiction right now, but believe me, as part of our patent research, I can tell you that there is probably a dozen people working on this already. It's starting to happen, whether in Web 2 or Web 3 mode, so centralized or decentralized. It's going to happen, and the time to prepare is now, right? For in 2 years.
As I was listening to you right now, I was in the back of my head, I was just envision, and you just triggered this thought. I would like to sit here again in 3 years from now and revisit what you just said in regards to the progress and the shift that is hopefully happening in the next years. I don't think it will happen in 12 months. And I'm now visualizing and understanding what the trigger is. Why would I walk away from a big Google or somebody else? But you just said it. If somebody else is out there, maybe not a small startup company, but somebody who over the next years, by taking advantage of AI capabilities, is building a service very focused and maybe even segmented at the beginning, but just enough for a fraction of the users here to move over there because there's something in it for me. They respect my privacy, I get paid for my data, and I tell you what, I actually would do it. I actually would be, people normally are lazy and comfortable with what they have, but that would be a motivation, and these seeds will then grow over time. And then you have the real challenge, and maybe that's what's needed, and regulations for the big guys then to actually do what they should have done.
Right. And look, I mean, these are all smart people in these hyperscaler companies. They know this kind of thing is coming, right? And let me be very clear. I mean, number one, I think what you're saying is right. Look, the Googles of this world, and I don't want to single out Google here, the hyperscalers, right? They're not going to go away, but they're also not like they're not attackable, right? They can still be toppled. So be very careful. We have toppled big companies before, and so hyperscalers need to take this very seriously, and I think they are.
Yes.
But even the challengers, right? So if you look at OpenAI, for instance, and I'm a fan of OpenAI's, And when you watched, last week's or whenever it was the week before, the interview with the CTO, it was brutal to watch, because what you want to tell the OpenAIs of this world is, look, it's actually you can get clean, agency-assured, privacy-assured data with good data rights if you invest in it and see that as a priority. Because I want the OpenAIs of this world to succeed. Right? I want the entrepreneurs of this world to succeed that challenge the big hyperscalers, because I'm an innovation guy. Yeah. But it's not going to happen without deliberately designing those solutions into our data economy.
Talk a little bit about how you see this happening in the B2B space versus the B2C space.
So if I am a CISO, so a Chief Information Security Officer dealing with cybersecurity, or if I am a Chief Data, Chief Digital, Chief Innovation Officer, CTO, pick your favorite title, and I deal with data, right? Then I have an idea of what's in my data pools, my data lakes, my data warehouses. I have an idea of what kind of data is coming in from customers, and what kind of data my employees are generating, right? And if I don't, that's an alarm bell right there, because in the digital economy, you ought to have a clean view of that. And if not, then that's a different kind of conversation. But if you do, then you are utterly aware that there is opportunity and there is risk in that data, right? So if I hold customer data, I want to be sure to hold it in a responsible way. Make sure I don't get hacked so that it flies off, right? And I get sued or lose trust in the market, right? That's one facet. The other facet is my employees are roaming the web out there. Sometimes they're doing that on my devices. Sometimes they carry a second or third device. And they're behaving in certain ways, some of which is related to what they do on the job. This is happening already today, that these people who are roaming are, of course, like any consumer, getting tracked by companies that put out trackers and that can make sense of who a certain person is, right? So if my employees are doing this, and let's say, let's take three examples. Somebody who works in the legal department researching patents, and then there's a second person, maybe in the marketing, chief marketing officer who's preparing a press release, and then maybe a senior engineer looking for code on StackOverflow.com, and I'm tracking them. I can start to triangulate between them what they're working on. What's the press release about, right? Yeah. What's the IP she's researching? What's the code that the engineer is looking for? And what might it yield? Now you might say, well, that's three people, fat chance that's going to happen. But now imagine a company with 30, 300, 3,000, 30,000 employees all being tracked at marginal cost in real time, right? So if I'm the CISO or the Chief Data or Innovation or Digital Officer, I better care. Yes. Because that's obviously a competitive intelligence threat to me, but it's also value lost. Because some of what's happening out there could actually be really valuable for me as a company inside if I just knew what's happening and I could assess it. But most CISOs don't actually have dashboards that show us what's the data footprint at stake here. And wouldn't you rather take that data footprint, parse it, and then sell it back into my value chain or my supply chain, right? Let's say if you're a big retailer, wouldn't you want to know how my employees and my customers are being tracked, give them security, understand that data footprint, flow it back through my supply chain so I get better product on the shelves? Of course. Yes. So it's a security risk, but it's also opportunity lost.
Interesting. Having said all of this coming from Europe, right? Any suggestions for the Europeans, the Germans, not just the Germans, the Europeans in general? Maybe a few hints with your deep knowledge, what to look out for, what to invest in, for them to catch up.
So I will say the obvious first, which is that I think Europe wants to stand for data dignity, data respect, respecting, protecting the individual. And that's great. So Europe should invest in the kinds of solutions that I just outlined. And it should be an agent of a necessary revolution. Winning the existing hyperscaler game is game over. Plus, you don't want to compete on those terms anyway. You have just shown this through the AI Act. So help redefine and reinvent the way the game is played. So invest in those decidedly, discreetly in those types of solutions, right? That's number one. Number two is invest in data marketplaces. Define and design what that means. How can we have a multi-sided trading environment like we have in equities or bonds or commodities, right? We don't really have a transparent international data market like we have for these other assets. Why not? If data is a valuable asset, we should be able to trade it on some open, transparent, privacy and security assured market. And that doesn't exist just yet. And so Europe should look at that because it's in its own interest. The problem with that, of course, is that it means admitting that some individual data is okay to trade. It's okay to make money with. And this is, again, where Europe's sort of very strong focus on just battening the hatches and shutting everything off may get in its own way, right? But
which we have seen in the past. That's a cultural thing, and it has never really helped in all of the big shift that we have seen in the high-tech industry in the last 30 years, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's this very strong risk mentality. And, and when you're in conversations like this, it's hard to say, no, you're wrong about that. Of course, they're not wrong. It's just if you put risk first all the time, you'll never lead, right? You'll always follow. And then thirdly, and you mentioned early on, right, Web3 and blockchain, there's, of course, it's very early days. It's not going to completely overtake an environment like in Web2, the hyperscalers, but it's going to augment, it's going to balance, it's going to take some time. We've seen some blowouts with coin, right? But go back to the year 2000. You and I were here. The internet blew up, right? We had the dot-com bubble. Does that mean we don't have an internet today? Of course not. In essence, it's sort of another one of these parallel revolutions of going back to what the internet was supposed to be like when it was first invented. It was supposed to be decentralized. And so, okay, we shouldn't have decentralization for everything. There is something to be said for having some centralized platforms and, as we say, parental supervision, situational awareness, regulators and institutions that are centralized that look at the stuff. But there are also many areas in society and the economy where the decentralized approach with, you mentioned DAOs, right, with governance driven by, let's say, voting is needed. And I would say Europe should invest in those solutions and should try to drive that decentralized paradigm because it goes well with European values on federated computing that is privacy assured, where I don't need to pool all the data. I can access it through smart contracts on chains. So I think that works very well with Europe. So those are just
great feedback. I really love it. Thank you very much. In closing, maybe just your personal opinion about where do you see the future? What's the next big thing after the whole generative AI hype around AI?
Yeah, so generative AI is all about language and really written and spoken text at the moment. There some on the image side, I would say we're going to be seeing a lot more computer vision driven AI. A lot of scholars are now coming out saying, look, the obvious one, an image can be as valuable as 1,000 words, right? There's a lot more information content, symbolic interpretation happening in images, and therefore more AI deployed that is more image-based is one of the things that we're going to be seeing. There are other really cool areas like AI derived off of how children cognate and how children process innovation, which sounds almost trivial, but we haven't really looked at that very closely because we always think, well, children have brains that still need to mature. That's why we look at grown-ups. But actually, it's almost like children are a separate cognitive species. Yes. the way they learn, the take in information, etc. And so children up to the age of, I don't know what, 12 or so, when the brains start changing, need to be studied because of the very different ways in which they process information. And so that's an exciting horizon. Then AI in robotics, which is sort of what I call the Blade Runner trajectory, right? Could you actually enable robots to learn with their entire body in terms of sensory input and incorporate AI in robots? And could you potentially give them memories, right? Which is then, right, that sounds more humanoid, but that's a new development horizon, or that is a forthcoming development horizon that's very exciting. Because we too, as humans, learn with our entire bodies. Our intelligence is spread throughout the body, right? It's not just the wetware up here. And then I think the ability to cluster different types of AI together, all with different target functions and different ways of accomplishing cognitive tasks, but collectively simulating more holistic intelligence. And it may not be human or superhuman, but it may rival a lot more of what we do every day. That's another one of those.
Love it. Olaf, thank you very much. I always like talking to you, and I always pick a few things up that just blows my mind.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right.